Hello, and welcome back to the Your Life Your Way show. I'm your host, Kathleen McDermott. Today, we are talking a lot about trauma and how we store that trauma. And my guest today is Marnel Hesterman, and she is the woman who has spent many years working on her own. Is this we all need to work on our own emotional wellness, and she has done that. She is the owner, founder, CEO of InciteInspirations. And Marnell refers to herself as an emotional wellness specialist for adult women. She is a certified life coach and tapping practitioner, and she helps women who are struggling with their emotional wellness, stress, overwhelm, burnout, and so much more. And I like her intention. She helps women move from what she calls the emotional spin cycle. God knows I've experienced that myself many times. And to return themselves to a space of calm, clarity, and confidence. So, Marnell, welcome to the Your Life Your Way. I'm so glad that you're here with us today, and I'm really anxious to hear more about you, your work, and if you could start out by telling us a little bit more than what I've offered and what brought you on this journey in the first place.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, Kathleen. I really appreciate the invitation to be on your podcast and to speak to things that are, really strongly embedded in my heart.
Mhm.
So I was on my own journey, just to give a little background of myself. And probably mid 40s, I found myself really struggling. So I sought out some self-development stuff, and I spent probably 5 years on that journey, and that's where I took my life coaching certification, and that's where I was exposed to tapping. And it was at the very end, probably the end of the 5 years, that I had an experience with tapping. And the person that came in and did it was like a 15-minute session, and I was so blown away by it that I was like, wow, this is the piece that's been missing. It's like we've all had this great awareness of all of these things that we've been struggling with throughout our lives, and the imprints that are left on us, and here is a tool that we can use to alleviate that stress, to get rid of those old beliefs, those old hurts, those old, and to create some new pathways in the brain to live a calmer life. So I immediately sought out training and added that to my coaching, and here I am,
Here you are.
13 plus years later. Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's so funny. As in fact, I just saw a meme. Somebody say the other day is we teach what we most had to learn ourselves. That's
Hmm.
makes perfect sense. I mean, it
It
absolutely does.
does.
That's exactly how it got me to what I do. But yes, I love hearing that. It's nice. It's you're relatable because people know exactly you've been to where they are.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I grew up in a kind of dysfunctional family, and I had a lot of struggles along the way, and there was a lot of just physical, mental, sexual abuse, and all the rest of it, and so by the time I got to 40, and it was just an overload. So I found myself in that spin cycle. We had moved several times and moved our family, and it was, looking for new jobs all the time, and it was just a lot. And so I found a way to relieve some of that, and to relieve some of the fears about life. And
That's a
so,
big one.
yeah, huge, huge.
Talk to
So,
me about trauma in our bodies. It's not just in our minds, it's not just in our thoughts, but it's in our bodies. So tell me about you used the word in our conversation about storing trauma.
yes, we store trauma, but I work mostly with the trauma that's stored in our minds.
Okay.
Trauma is also stored in our bodies, and we do have physical responses to trauma, but I work with the trauma that's stored in our subconscious.
Okay.
So our subconscious is, like, I like to refer to it as a filing cabinet. And as we go through life, every experience that we have, whether it's good or bad, we store little bits and pieces in that subconscious. And that becomes basically our blueprint that we pull from to when we have any situation that's similar to something that we've already experienced, our mind automatically goes to the subconscious and says, how did we react to this before? What did we do previously? And it will react in the same way, or it will react from a belief that we created because of what happened. So I like to give an example of, if you're learning to drive, you're automatic, you have to really think about it when you're learning, that red means stop, green means go. So when you're first going through those initial times, you're like, okay, that's, I need to stop, or I need to go now. But once you've driven for a while, you automatically do it, because those things are stored in your subconscious. So, and then I like to relate to, if you had problems with a family member, say, and there was a lot of hurt or a lot of different things that had happened over the years, you store all those things in your subconscious. Maybe you've pushed those emotions down, you just tried to ignore it, let's make peace for peace sake. Right. And so then you're at a family gathering, and that family member says some little thing to you, nothing major, but you might explode, or you might have a very emotional reaction to that family member, because all of those old things are still stuck in your subconscious, and they're coming to the surface because this thing reminded you of what has happened in the past.
Do you think that's kind of scary for someone, because they don't, at that point, they probably don't even realize what's brought forth that reaction? I can remember there's times myself, I've had a reaction to something, and part of me is thinking, why am I doing that?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's very unconscious sometimes, right? Because our subconscious is 85% of our brain, and 15% is the logical reasoning part. And when we are triggered by something in the subconscious that has been painful or scary or traumatic in some way, then our logical reasoning part of our brain goes offline, because our amygdala takes over and we go into that fight or flight response. So what I do is I work with people to rewire those neural pathways in the brain through tapping. So we're working on the energy meridians of the body, and we're talking through whatever has happened. And we don't always necessarily have to talk in great detail. It's just to address it specifically for them. It's like, this event happened and this was really scary, and maybe there were certain smells, maybe there were certain surroundings that affected them, and we can work through it so that they can remember the event or the experience, but they no longer have that physical or emotional response to it.
So tell us a little bit more about how that works.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a conversation. Is that what you're saying, like the process?
Well, more the process, but then because it's important to understand, I think, how the steps, because it helps me understand, hopefully it helps someone else understand how you reach the point where then it actually starts to physically and emotionally, mentally work.
Okay. So it's, we have a conversation about things about your life. Okay. So when you come to me, we have a lot of conversation about how satisfied you are in a lot of life areas. And we rate them all on a scale of 1 to 10. And then we work on the areas that either you've come to me specifically to work on, or the areas that you are most dissatisfied with. And I will ask you a lot of questions. And people say, you ask really good questions. And that's just something that I pride myself on, is that I have a knack to ask the right questions. I feel like I'm intuitive in a lot of ways, that I can get a feel for what direction we need to go. And through all of those questions, there are things that come up. And then there are maybe things that come up that cause emotion. and then we'll hone in a little deeper on that. And there are things that people have sat in, in a session with me, and they're like, wow, I never thought that that was connected
Mm.
to whatever in my life, or I never thought that I was still hanging on to that. I thought I was over it a long time ago. But there are still things that are residing in our nervous system, in our subconscious, that are constantly at play, that we're not even aware of anymore. So if there's times in your life when you are feeling overwhelmed, you are feeling emotional, you are feeling like you're spinning out of control, or that you're dissatisfied in certain areas of your life, or you're feeling fearful about things, then that is where, it's time to do some compassionate inquiry into what's going on underneath.
That's one of my favorite words is underneath. That's
Yeah,
where all the answers are, is underneath.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So it's not so much about, okay, what's wrong with me? What's going on with me? What's wrong with me? It's what's happened to you
Yes.
in your lifetime that's caused you to feel like this. And there's often many, many things. So once we've discovered some of the traumas, or some of the hurts, or some of the fears, or whatever it is that we need to work on, then we will address those specifically while tapping through them. And I create a specific script from our conversation that applies only to you. And that's why I like to work one-on-one, because I find it's so much more effective to work one-on-one rather than in a group, because I can address your stuff specifically, your feelings specifically. So then we tap through the energy meridians. We rate it first off, and then we tap through the energy meridians. And then I check in and I'll say, okay, so now let's go back to that. And how are you feeling about that now?
Excuse me.
And so very often it has dropped. And sometimes it's 1 or 2 points, on a scale of 1 to 10, but a lot of times it'll drop by 6 points. And it's really cool in this work is that when it's like, I always refer to it like a tabletop. So the tabletop is the issue, and the legs under the table are the aspects that contributed to the issue.
Okay.
And when we work on the highest rated aspects of that issue, there are a lot of times that the other aspects will just fall away on their own. And we can check in continuously about, okay, so are you feeling that in your body anywhere? Are you feeling any emotion over that anymore? And people are, even myself, I am still blown away by how quickly it resolves the things from the past. And I have done a lot of my own work. And one of my big ones that I worked on was my fear of flying. And this one still, just to this day, is just like, I got on a plane for my very first time, and I was physically ill. I was so afraid to be on that plane. And I was white knuckle gripped on the armrests and wanted to get off the plane. We had a layover and I got off, and I did not want to get back on to get to our destination. I was terrified. Well, it came up later in tapping that my dad had a really good friend that he lost in a plane crash when I was like 6 years old. So I watched my dad grieve the loss of his friend over that plane crash. And we also went out to visit the crash site.
Oh,
And so it was very traumatic for my little mind. I was like, my 6-year-old mind automatically created a belief that if you get on a plane, you're going to die. So
mm.
I worked on that fear, and I only worked on it once. And I have no problem flying now. None.
Well, that's good because you get to so many other beautiful places.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's so
Yeah.
interesting because you're working with the meridians, which I'm familiar with because I practice and teach yin yoga, which works with the meridian energy line meridians. Um, so how is it with the tapping? I have experienced tapping in a shorter version, nothing to what the practice that you're describing right now. Um, so I'm thinking to myself, okay, meridians, energy lines. So is it distracting the subconscious? While it's definitely working with energy because you're working with the meridians. So is the energy, how is it getting the subconscious to open up and say, okay, we can take this out of the files?
Well, okay, we bring up the issue and we talk about it briefly, and then we're calming that fight or flight center of the brain with the tapping, and that
Which it
allows.
habitually goes into when it has that thought.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And then it allows us to calm that center so that then we can process those emotions out.
Okay. Gotcha. So it's all of it, but I see the step a little clearer there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. It's a phenomenal process. And I love to watch people's faces even because they change,
Mhm.
that stress and that tension just melts away. Like it's an amazing, amazing process. And I offer a guarantee on all my sessions.
I did remember you
So
saying that.
yeah, and so there's no risk, and I confidently offer that because over the 13 plus years, I've only had one person not pay me for a session, and that's my guarantee is that if you don't feel better about whatever we've worked on in your session, then you don't pay me. And yeah, it works every time.
What do you find have been, are there things that are tougher that take more practice with this type of technique? Um, what do you find? It must be a range, I'm guessing. I don't know. A range of whether some are simpler, milder, more difficult.
I think it's very specific to the person,
Hmm.
and it's very specific as to how much trauma they have endured in their life, right? And how many different traumatic experiences they've had. Because sometimes we have to work through a lot of different things that have
And they're
happened to
separate
them.
things.
And there might be separate things,
Mhm.
and they might all be, those aspects underneath that main issue, you know,
Mhm.
for each individual. I like to say, like, it's like you have a pool, and every time you have a traumatic event, there's a ball thrown in. And for some people, their pool's filled up really quickly in life. And for others, they might have just a few balls in their pool. But once the pool is full, then those balls have nowhere to go and they start popping out and causing issues, right? And that's where I say, like, then the physical, the emotional stuff starts showing up because we're overloaded. We're up to here. We have no more room to stuff things down and to hold on to things.
And I'm sure you've had people that you've worked with that it's affecting their health, their relationships. So how it must be a great turnaround for them to go back now with this newfound release, to go back
It,
into their relationships and to improve their health.
yes, yes. And I don't claim to cure anybody's
No, but
health
just to, let's
issues.
just say wellness, to
Yes,
wellness overall.
wellness overall for sure. Yes. And I've had so many clients, like, they're like, oh, I wish I would have found you 20 years ago. But it's like, well, I'm grateful that you're here now. It's like, yeah.
Do you have,
Yeah.
we're talking a lot about, beliefs and emotional baggage. And a lot of that, I believe, we're not taught how to process our emotions because our parents weren't taught how to process emotions and so on and further back and further back. How do you how do you find that it helps someone to go forward? Are they, as they go forward with new emotions coming up or new experiences, are they doing their own tapping from there, or do you teach them to do it themselves?
They can do their own tapping, and we do enough of it in the sessions that, they very definitely can follow through on their own. But I always tell people that it's really hard to do tapping on your own. And
Why is that?
I also go to a practitioner myself. I have my own tapping
Mhm.
practitioner because we as human beings want to move away from our pain.
Oh gosh, yes.
It's just a natural response
Mhm.
that we want to move away from the pain. So when we start to think of something that has brought us pain, it's hard to stick with it. So we might start tapping, but we can't remember the words that we should say, or we can't think of the words that we should say, or we lose track of where we're tapping, or we just get distracted
I was going to say, we think
because
about the next thing we have to do.
because we are trying to move away from that pain. And that's a subconscious reaction that we're not really even aware. We're just like, well, I don't know why I can't stick with this. And I don't know, I just can't seem to do this. But it's if you work with a practitioner, then a practitioner can guide you through and keep you on track until you have actually processed through it. Yeah. So it's tapping can be used for some things on your
Mhm.
own, but anything that's deep rooted and that has been very traumatic, like it's better to have that support and have that guidance through it.
Well, you're also, yes, the guidance, the support, but you're also holding that safe space. And that's so important to have. Let's face it, we don't have a lot of people around us that can hold that safe space for us just on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of times we don't even know how to hold it for ourselves.
Yes.
So having someone like yourself, any of us that do the work that we do, that can hold that safe space for someone to feel calm and confident to look within is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think once you have started to do work in those spaces and to kind of look inside and underneath of what's actually going on, then you become more aware on a daily basis of, oh, okay, what it's making me react like that. Like, what's behind that? A little more curious,
Yeah.
right?
We begin to allow ourselves to be more, I find, if you agree, to allow ourselves to be more open to the signs, the feelings, the sounds that are trying to show us the opportunity to have that awareness and have answers. And that
Yes.
happened last night. I have been struggling with trying to find an answer to this situation, this thing within me. And just walking into my room to bed last night, all of a sudden this word came to my mind. And I went, oh, yes, that's it. And that's what I found has been so much about doing. I love anything energy work, and I love the work that I do, of course, and I love the work that you do. And any of us that do um, anything that has to do with energy to heal, I think is such a beautiful thing because everything is energy. It's woo woo, yes,
Yes.
but it's also physics. Everything is energy.
Yes.
And just having that as you work it, you're doing the work, or you're doing the work, a practice. I like to call it a practice too, because sometimes we hear work and we think, ooh, more down the to do list. But it gets easier. It really does get easier.
Yes.
You stop getting the
Yes.
two by fours and you hear it and you listen and you feel it, and it gets
Yeah.
easier.
Well, and once you can create a new belief,
Yes.
see a new perspective, see other options, like
Mm-hmm.
it's just it's relief,
Yeah.
right? It's no longer that burden that's on your shoulders that's weighing you
Freedom.
down. It's freedom. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's
And
so cool.
so many aspects of life, right? It's like that's what people say, like, well, can you give us some specifics? And it's like, well, I've worked on so many things in my life. Oh, with this, like relationships, and I had a really tough relationship with my mom, and I would spend days crying after every one of her visits, and I got to the point where, through tapping, that I could actually see her with compassion and love and understanding of where she came from. And
Bingo.
and I could create my own boundaries so that I was no longer affected by what she was dishing out, you know? It was like, No, I don't need to take that personally. That's got nothing to do
No,
with me
because it's
really,
all her
which I
fault.
used to,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it it's very freeing. Freeing, I guess is yeah.
It is, and you're freeing yourself from the pain and suffering of what you've been carrying, but you're also freeing because we carry our parents, and our
Mhm.
grandparents, and you're freeing those, your children, your
Mhm.
grandchildren. It's I don't know, sometimes I have a hard time finding the words that I feel from my own heart that describes it. And
Yeah.
it really does. You use the word compassion, and that's so true because you find such compassion and love and grace for yourself. But now, those that you've had such angst towards, maybe, or fear, you do have now that compassion and grace. And even when you probably find when you're at the market or you're out and you hear somebody's maybe in a mood, and the first thing I think of, I wonder what they're carrying.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
First thing I
Yep.
think
That's
of.
automatic, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, that you're mad at them about something. It's like, oh, I wonder what's happening in your day, or I wonder what's going on for you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
So what else
there's
would you
always
like?
something.
Yes, it is. Life is always throwing something at,
Well,
little
and it's
trials and practices and
it's like this, right? I say it's
yes,
like a roller
yes,
coaster, right?
yes.
There's ups and downs all the time, and it's good to free yourself of some of that burden
Mhm.
that you might be carrying or that you've pushed down, because so many of us think that we can just push it down and we'll get
Oh yeah.
over it, but we don't. If you think of it and it causes any kind of a physical response in your body, or it causes any kind of an emotional response, then you're not over it.
No.
You're not over it. You're still carrying it, and it's still alive and well.
And it's going to come out somewhere,
And it's
sometime, when you
yeah,
don't want it to.
yeah. And like I said, when we're up to here, then it starts to show up as physical
Yeah.
ailments, aches and pains in the body, and yeah, mental, emotional wellness issues, and
Mhm.
yeah.
So tell me, I saw in your notes to me
Hmm.
some words that I'm also familiar with, but I'd love to hear your take on actually two things. But first, the be do have.
Well, the B is be all you can be, right? And I think in doing our own personal work, we can be better versions of ourselves, and to do the work so that you can have the life that you would desire. And the have is having that life that you desire because you've gone through the processes and gone through the work.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And lastly, what does your life your way mean to you?
Your life, your way. Ooh, that's like living from your heart,
Mm.
checking in with every decision that you make. Does this feel good to me? And if it doesn't feel good, then actually examining, being curious again as to what makes me think I should do this if it's not feeling good. Because there are so many places in life where we are living our lives with shoulds and
That's
have
another whole
tos.
conversation.
Yeah,
I
yeah. So I would say check in, yeah,
like it.
and live your life your way.
Very nice. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Hmm.
Marnell, do you have anything that you'd like to offer or extend to my listeners, and also share with us how they can reach out to you?
Well, they can check out my website. I think you're going to add that in the comments and the notes and stuff. Incite, INCITE, inspirations.com. And you can email me, Marnel, Marnel, at InciteInspirations.com. I also offer a 10-minute complimentary telephone conversation, if you want to have a chat with me about whatever's going on with you, and just to see if we'd be a good fit to work together, whether I can help you with whatever's going on in your life, if you'd like to, do some compassionate inquiry into what's going on, then yeah, by all means, reach out and we can set that up. My booking calendar right now is offline, so and it hasn't been fixed yet. So if you want to book with me, just DM me or email me, and we'll get it done. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Marnel, thank you so much for everything you've shared. And please feel free to reach out to Marnel and get more information, just have a conversation with her. She might just be the avenue that you've been looking for. And I thank you all for being a member of the Your Life, Your Way community, for listening with us today. And please, if you know of anyone that might be struggling and might be looking for an avenue to help them out, please share this episode and subscribe. We'll have more great guests and information coming along soon. Thank you all again. I appreciate you very much. Marnel, thank you very much. I appreciate you very much. And everyone, have a blessed day.
Thank you.